All right, welcome to the first video on Adobe Illustrator. Today we're going to cover getting started on an initial document as well as understanding some basic shapes. And I'll also talk to you a bit about just the basic navigation of the Illustrator environment, which can be a little intimidating at first because there are so many things, there's so many tools and icons and menus. So the first thing you're going to do when you open up the Illustrator program is you're going to create a new document. If you don't see this, if maybe you already have your Illustrator application running, you can just go to File, New. In my case, I'm just going to hit Create New. And for today's purposes, we are going to select a print document. And we're going to make sure it's a letter size, which is 8.5 by 11. But we're going to change the orientation to landscape. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and name this document Basic Shapes. All right, so we're going to hit Create. And what we'll see here is a starter document. It's of 8.5 by 11 landscape size. And then off to the left-hand side, we have some tools, and off to the right-hand side, we have some panels. Now, mine might look different than yours, and so just want to talk a little bit about workspaces. Up in the window menu up at the top, you'll see workspace as an option, and there are different types of workspaces. So depending on the type of task that you're doing, you can have different tools ready. So for example, if I went to the painting workspace, notice how the tools on the left have changed, and the palettes and panels on the right side have also changed. So in the case, if you want to follow through with the tutorial alongside of what I'm doing so that you can see the same screens, I'm going to have you pick the essentials. All right, and even if yours might look different than mine, you could always go to Workspace, Essentials, and then Reset Essentials to make it look like what I have here. All right, so we are here with this document, and we're going to create some basic shapes through tracing over existing shapes. Think of this like if you were just learning how to draw with a person who's teaching you. They might give you a sheet of shapes or things that are drawn, and you can put some tracing paper over it and learn to draw over those shapes. We're doing the same thing but in Illustrator. So I'm going to go get my template, and this file will be available for you to download inside the video links at the bottom. So I'm going to go to File, Place. Placing a document is how you bring an element into Illustrator. And I'm going to find the basicshapes.png file. Now, I could just bring this in and it would be an element within my document, but for today we're actually going to come down here to the bottom and select template. And what this does is once I place it, this actually creates, up here on the top right hand side, you'll see the layers tab. This creates a template layer. So this layer is going to sit below all the things that I'm working on. And notice that it's got a little lock. That means it's in there and it can't be moved. Like I can't click on it and move it around. It's also been faded a little bit so that I can trace over it. All right, but I'm going to work on this layer. So I'm selecting this layer to be able to start to create some shapes on. All right, I'm going to click back on properties because these are going to be some things that'll pop up that'll be of interest and be important for us to learn about. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you that the two most often used tools are the selection tool and the direct selection tool. Notice when I hover over them, every tool, when you hover over it, it'll show you the label of what that is. And also notice that in terms of the selection tool and the direct selection tool, they have a little letter next to them. And that's just a shortcut key to be able to switch back and forth. I don't use a lot of shortcut keys, but those are two that I do use to get me from the direct selection to the selection and back and forth. So we're going to start with the rectangle. We're going to basically trace these first 6 shapes here. We'll do this 7th shape in a different video. So I'm going to start with a rectangle. And the easiest way to make this rectangle is using the rectangle tool. If I click and hold on this rectangle, you'll notice that I have a bunch of different shape options. We'll use a few of these today. I'm going to focus right now on the rectangle tool. And you'll also notice that there are these two color components here. One is fill and the other is stroke. So if I have a white fill and a black stroke when I make a rectangle, what happens is you now have a rectangle that is outlined in black and filled in white. Okay? For purposes of today, I'm actually going to start with a fill that's empty in order for me to see what's underneath. So if I click on the fill and I can click on the no fill option, now if I make a rectangle, I get the same rectangle with a black outline, but this time the fill is empty and I can see through it. Okay, so I'm going to start from the beginning, click my rectangle tool. I'm going to start at the top left corner of this rectangle, click and hold and drag down to the bottom right. All right, and if I drag the middle, this little center dot here, I can drag the shape around and I'll notice that I've got a pretty accurate rectangle. So that's shape number 1. For shape number 2, I've got a little hint here that says hold shift, the shift key down, for perfect squares or perfect circles, etc. So with the rectangle tool still selected, I can hold down my shift key, and now from the top left, if I click and hold, notice that I get, no matter where I go, no matter where I drag this mouse, I've got a perfect square. And so I'll just stop right there. I can test this out. Yep, perfect square. For number 3, we have an oval shape, and so I'm going to have to come up to my shapes panel here and select the ellipse tool. And the way I teach my students how to think about creating an oval is imagine that it were a rectangle. And you'd have the corner, top left corner would be somewhere here, and the bottom right-hand corner would be somewhere here if it were a rectangle of the same size. So I just imagine I'm starting at the top left and dragging to the bottom right. And that generally gives me a pretty good idea of how to make that oval. One other option you can do in Illustrator is you can start in the center and hold your Option key down if you're on a Mac, or an Alt key if you're on Windows, and then just drag out from the center. Okay, now this looks pretty good other than the fact that it doesn't match the fill color. So over on my Properties panel, the fill is currently empty. If I click on that fill, I can go select a color. So I'm just going to go get a green. Okay, doesn't quite match because I have a faded background, but it's close enough for this exercise. Okay, so I'm going to go grab that, put that in the center. I now have a polygon, a triangle. There isn't actually a triangle tool, but there is a polygon tool, multiple different lengths of any shape with straight sides. So I'm going to click on my polygon tool, and I'm just going to click once here, and it's going to ask me how many sides do you want. So I'm going to pick 3 sides, and I'm going to hit OK. And I get my triangle. Now, a couple things. The triangle has a fill of green, so if I click on fill, I'm going to return back to the no fill. And the size needs to be corrected. So I'm going to take one of these handles. Notice that all shapes have these handles around the sides. So the handles can be used to drag to a different shape. The corner handles obviously affect 2 sides, and the side handles affect just that particular side. So I'm going to take this up here, I'm going to match up my corners. Looking good. Great. All right. The next shape down here on the bottom left is my star tool, or my star shape. And so I'm going to come up here, and there actually is a star tool here. So I can click and drag and grab a star. I can affect the size and the angle right now. So I'm going to pick the angle that I think matches what I've got. In order for me to move this over, though, I'm going to go back to my selection tool and drag from the line there. And that looks pretty good. Notice that if I'm on any corner, and this is any shape, by the way, you can change the angle. So if I'm on this shape and I go to this corner, I can change the angle. Okay, and I can hold my shift key down. If I hold my shift key down, it actually constrains to 90 degrees, 45 degrees, etc. It's very specific angles. Okay, but if I don't hold my shift key down, I can select any angle like this. Well, the star almost looks the same, except that it's not filled with the right color, and its stroke size does not match. So let's start with the stroke size. If I come over here while it's selected, if I come over here to the right and I increase the stroke, click on it, that looks pretty good. 5 points I think is a pretty close match. And then the last thing I have to do is fill it with some kind of yellow fill. Okay, and I can move that back. And that looks good. And then the last shape that I'm going to show you on this video is this rectangle that's been modified a bit. And so it looks like a regular rectangle. If I come over here to my rectangle tool and I drag top left to the bottom right, I get my rectangle. First thing I notice is that it's the wrong color, so I'm going to go fill it. And the stroke is too big, so I'm going to reduce that. So that looks pretty good, but some of the corners are rounded on this rectangle below. So what I'm going to do, rather than the selection tool, is I'm going to choose the direct selection tool. And what the direct selection tool does is it allows us to modify specific points on a shape. So here are these 4 corners. If I were to click on one of these corners, that corner turns blue, the handle on that corner turns blue, and the rest of these remain white. And I'm going to use this rounding tool right here. If I click and hold on it and drag it down, it's now going to create a rounded shape for me. All right, just on that one corner. Let me take that back for a second, because if I were just on the selection tool and I were to pick that and move it, I would be rounding all the corners, which is great and handy depending on what you're doing. In our case, because we are only affecting one corner, I'm just going to click that one first. And by the way, I kind of skimmed over it really fast, but I just undid the work that I did. So remember that another sort of keystroke that you'll use often is undo, and that's Command Z on the Mac or Control Z on Windows. So that's going to be, I use it often because I'm often undoing a step that I just previously did. So I'm going to now, with my direct selection tool and one corner selected, I'm going to grab the rounding tool and pull it down until I see it matches the corner that I'm using. I'm going to click on the bottom left, do the same thing here until it matches. And now I have my irregular rectangle shape. All right, that's it for this video. On the next one, we will focus on working on this fish shape that looks like it's made of multiple basic shapes. Keep in mind, we're going to want to make sure we save this file for next time. So we're going to go to File, Save, and it's going to ask us to put it somewhere. I'm going to leave it on the desktop for now. Yours might say Save to Cloud or Save to Computer, and it's up to you where you want to save it. My students, for now, will save to the computer, and then I'm going to put it on the desktop. Great, hit OK, and now that's saved. And I'll see you next time.